Okay, so once again, thank you for joining the channel, becoming a member and supporting. I do sound a little nasally this morning. I've got some allergies. But let's jump right into this video. This starts with milling down these. These are 3.5 by 3.5 posts, cedar posts, and I'm going to go ahead and just mill these on my S4S. This machine will surface all four sides of these boards at one pass. So it's a super fast, super quick way to do things. So I'll surface them down to from 3.5 to 3 inches square, and then from there we move over and cross cut them to length. One of these will make up the cross post, and two will make up the uprights, which are 4 feet, and the cross post is 6 feet. You can see that light flashing in the background. That is a warning light telling me that the bin is full on my dust collector. And as usual, I'm fairly lazy and I don't dump it unless I absolutely have to. Okay, with the parts cut to length, now I'm going to move on and cut mortises in the cross post, which is the top post of the goal. I'm putting that piece all the way the distance of the goal, that way that no rain can get down in the joint easily. If I joint it to the upright post and you have that joint there, there's going to be ingrain exposed vertical, and you can get moisture down in that joint. So you'll notice on this machine there's quite a high step to push down on the pedal, and that is one of the downsides to the Oliver 91 mortiser. That's why the guy actually sold this machine, because he wanted a Powermatic with the lever action, but you actually get way more leverage off the pedal, and if you have the flexibility, it works fine. I'm cutting 2.5 inch deep mortises here. That's a 1/2 inch mortising bit, and they are, I think they're 2.25, I think, in length. I don't have that exact on my head. This mortising bit works fairly well. When you use it, you always want to make sure that you see chips coming out, getting ejected. If the chips stop coming out, then they're clogged in there, and it's going to heat up the tooling really quick. That's the only trouble with this machine, is it operates at 3,000 RPM, so the tooling is moving fast, and it'll heat up really quick, and you can ruin that steel real fast. Obviously, if you don't have a mortiser, you can do this with a plunge router and a 1/2 inch spiral bit, or you could just go old-fashioned and cut them with a chisel. Okay, with the mortises cut, we'll move to the tenons. Do that on the old Oliver bandsaw as well. These are going to come right off the bandsaw to be fitted. I have pre-laid out the tenons with a marking gauge, so I know where my lines are. And then I just worked on setting my fence in a way that I could cut right to that line and then pull it out and flip it and do the other side. That way it's perfectly centered on the workpiece. There is some setup time with this that you don't see in the video. And then once I get it cut on the bandsaw, I've already got my table saw pre-set up to take off the shoulder, just clear that waste off. And when I do this, I have a board set up, clamped to my fence. That is my reference, my stop that I use. You should see that here in a second. And that'll set where my shoulders are going to cut every time if I slide the board and reference off that. You can see I've already cut the top shoulder, and now I'm going to clear the bottom, and there's the tenon. We'll do a quick test fit of this to make sure that the fit is good. And so I'm happy with that, and now I can mark a little line there for my haunch and then take that waste out, doing the exact same thing. I'm going to use the table saw. I'm going to use the same setup. I'm not going to change my fence of the block. I'm just going to change the height of the blade, because I'm not cutting quite as high here. And then that last bit, there's one last cut there. You could do that freehand on a bandsaw. I'm just opting to strike a line and use my handsaw here. You could also probably split it with a chisel if you get straight grain. It would work pretty well. Okay, so there is your tenon. I've obviously already done the other one as well. I'm not showing that in the video. So now I'm going to move on to drilling holes. I'm going to draw bore these joints together. So these are my mortises, and I'm drilling 2 3/8 holes. Not all the way through the workpiece. I'm stopping about a 1/4 inch from the bottom on these. And I'm going to do that on both sides. So now I'm going to use my chisel. There's some breakout in there when you drill through because there's not supported wood, so it's going to chip out on you. So you just clear that out with a chisel. You don't see this in the other video, but I do a dry assembly here to lay out my draw bore. Basically what's going to happen is I'm going to put this together, clamp it. We're going to take that 3/8 drill bit and just drop it into those holes and mark out where those holes line up with the tenon. And so once you do that, you take the whole frame back apart, and then you actually move your hole on your tenon. We're going to move it maybe a 1/16 towards the shoulder. It kind of depends on what wood you're using. On this one, a 1/16 was probably a little too much because this wood is really soft, and instead of draw boring, it actually kind of crushed the fibers on that tenon. But we'll go ahead and mark these. You see I've moved the holes here, and then I'm going to go to the drill press, drill those out, and this will be ready for assembly. So when you drill all the way through a workpiece here, I've obviously got my depth stopped so that the point of the brad point bit goes through the other side, but not the whole bit, because I don't want to blow out and break a bunch of fibers loose. I'll flip it over and then finish those holes out with that little pilot hole I've created with the point. It's just good practice to do. It's easy to be lazy and just drill right through there, but it is sloppy and it will break out a lot of fibers. Okay, so now that I have all my holes prepped, my joint is almost ready to assemble. I need to make the pins, so I need to make 3/8 pins, and I'm using a dowel plate to do that. I use a chisel there to prep the stock to make it fit through the hole, and then you just basically hammer it through, and that plate will create a 3/8 dowel. It's important to get your sizing right. You want to be maybe a 1/16 over 3/8, so 7/16 square. Makes it pretty easy. If you're too big of a workpiece, it doesn't hammer through very well at all, and it doesn't really work well. It won't create a very good dowel. So I made 2 of these. I'm test fitting it here. It's kind of out of frame, just to make sure. They're a bit tricky. They usually come out a little bit smaller than the hole. In this case, that happened. So I'll glue up. I'm using Titebond 3. That is a waterproof glue since this is going to be outside. Hopefully that will help. Although with the draw board and the pegs, the glue is kind of is not necessary, to be honest with you. It'll help strengthen this joint, but it's going to be pretty solid without the glue as well. So I put the draw boards in. You can see, typically you would see that gap close where the shoulder meets the other workpiece. And I think the reason this draw board didn't work very well is because that cedar is so incredibly soft. I'm using oak here for the dowel, and I think it just bruised the wood more than it pulled it together. It did work a little bit. You can see it closed up pretty close. I had to come back with clamps and finish it off. If it was a harder wood species like an oak or hickory or pecan, I think it would have really sucked it together. So now I'm doing the other side, same thing. I think this one pulled together a little bit better with the draw bore. If you want to learn more about draw bores, I actually did a blog post in Popular Woodworking on their blog. So if you Google that, you could probably find that and learn a little bit more about it. Last step is to check for square. We'll make sure that this thing is squared up nicely. And then you see I put a clamp there on the bottom end to kind of, it was splaying out a little bit, to kind of pull it together and keep everything correctly aligned. Okay, so after letting that glue set, actually working pretty late on this video. This is nighttime here. I'm going to put the bottom rails that will help support the goal and hold the net. I'm going to dovetail these into the bottom of the post. So that's the first thing I'm doing, is dovetailing this little, it's 1.25 by 3 inches dimensions on that. I'm just using my bandsaw. You could do this with a handsaw as well. So with those 2 lines cut, I can now come back and clear off that waste, and I'll use a knife wall all the way around the workpiece to give me something to work with. It's always good practice. So I'm just using my chisel and chiseling away that little knife wall there to set up a good point for my saw to start. This is very common practice anytime you're going to handsaw and with hand tools. So I've got a little starting point there for my teeth to fit into. I can saw right to my line. Just take that waste out. And obviously we'll flip it over and do the opposite side. Exact same way. So with the dovetail cut, I will drop the post down, put it in the clamps, and then it's just a matter of transferring that tail over to the bottom of the post. So you just want to get it set up and get it lined up how you want it, and just use your pencil, and you're going to mark, you want a fairly sharp pencil here. You're going to mark your line. I've actually got a stand you don't see in frame that's holding this up to make it easier. There you go, you can see it there. So there's a number of ways you can remove the waste here and cut this out. I'm just going to use freehand a upcut spiral bit that's 3/8. This thing will cut 1 1/4 inches deep, so it cuts exactly the depth I need to cut. I'm going the full depth of the workpiece. You could come in with a handsaw and hand cut the 2 dovetail lines and then chisel out the waste, but that is a lot of work. So I freehand out as close as I can to the line with my router, and that's really the best way to do it. And then I come back with a wide bladed chisel, and just chisel to my line. You want to be real careful here chiseling down, because if your grain's not working for you, you can actually split out. So if that's happening, you want to come with the chisel across the grain as opposed to down the grain. I did get a little chip out on this one. You can see right here I come across the grain with my chisel. That technique right there is much better than down if your grain's not working for you. It's a little harder to control. So I just do a little assembly here. It fits really well. This is a solid joint. And the only downside I have to this is it's going to be sitting on the ground. So who knows what it's going to be like in 8 years, 10 years, maybe less. But I found that to be the best way to go with what I was working with. So I came in this morning after a late night of working last night trying to get this done. And I got to work and forgot to turn the mic on, so I have no audio on some of this work. So really quick, I'm going to walk you through what I've done. I've got the shots, I just don't have sound. So you saw me cut the dovetail and then the pocket for the dovetail. This frame is the bottom of the goal, and it is mortise and tenon, just the same. I did not shoot video of that because there was no point. It's the exact same joint as that one, so you don't have to see it twice. So basically this morning, I've glued this and screwed it in place, made sure it was all square. Got the stand holding it up. I had a little blowout over here. Things got a little tweaked, kind of cracked, so I've got clamps on that. Let that sit for a few hours, and then we'll pull it out of the clamps and get back to work. So you heard my mic wasn't on. I missed quite a bit of audio on those shots. Basically what we had was assembling that bottom frame. Now I did, what you didn't see in that video and what I didn't film was the back, that long back runner is mortise and tenon to those dovetailed pieces. Just the same as we did to the post and uprights. I used the mortiser and I used the bandsaw, exact same technique, so there's really no point in going over that again. So I mortised that, glued it, clamped it, and then once it dried, I was able to put that whole assembly down into the dovetails and screw and glue that in. So I just found these little clips, that actually wire clips from Home Depot, and after using the gold, they don't work great. They tend to bend real easily. For a 4-year-old shooting on it, it's not an issue, but whenever I shoot the ball in there and I kick it really hard, it can bend the clips. These are pieces of PVC that I painted black. I actually bought a $50 gold from Dick's Sporting Goods, and it was the only reason I bought it was the only way I could get the net, and these pieces came with it, and I was like, oh, I could use these, and that's basically it. It's fairly light, easy to carry, and for the most part, it worked really well, and I think my daughter really liked it. I did put a finish on it. I put Total Boats, a varnish from Total Boat on it, and I'll probably put 2 or 3 coats. So yeah, came out good. If you guys have any questions, be sure to shoot a comment down below. And again, I really appreciate you guys joining up. Go!